Morning, folks. Appreciate everyone being here so early. I'd like to go ahead and call this special meeting to order. So we just have a couple things. Mr. Donahue, can you give us kind of a summary of the contract?
Yeah, and then I'll let Tim kind of go into some of the particulars. But as you remember from our last meeting, we sought authority for the superintendent to be able to award the site portion, only the pre-construction site work. Well, on the Friday following the meeting, we met with Hickory, and much to all of our surprises, we were able to work out the whole contract with some issues that went over to the next Monday or Tuesday. But by Tuesday of last week, we were able to finalize the entire document, and didn't see the need to wait. Well, we needed to move on. Didn't see the need to break out the side portion. We had the whole thing done, so that's why we decided to ask if we could have a special called meeting in order just to knock the thing out. They are ready to roll. They have. They wanted to have this meeting. They wanted us to have this meeting last week. They're on a very tight deadline to get the site contract awarded by September the 30th, and there's a particular reason why that needs to be done. So timing is really of the essence. So Tim, if you want to go over some of the, I think probably what you all are most interested in is the price points. I think Tim's going to go over that. Again, I will be happy to go over any aspect of this contract that you want. But I think the most important thing, probably the thing that you all want to hear, is the price. So, Tim?
Yeah, so we looked at a number of other projects. I've talked to folks in my position that have done construction manager at risk to kind of understand the landscape of what fees are and such. And where we ended up was kind of a middle ground. So, of course, our contractor, would like to make as much money as possible. And how do we come up with, why shouldn't we be the lowest? Of course, that's where we started. But we have a number of mitigating factors, I would call them, in our project that are challenges and that kind of led us to believe that this is kind of a medium level of project of difficulty and cost for the contractor. We've got two distinct construction phases, so that's a lot of work for a contractor to have to do a site and separate, award it, manage it, and then the building construction. So that's kind of a mitigating factor that if you start at the bottom of rates, we have a very expedited schedule. They've got to basically drop what they're doing and get on it. We really do believe we've gotten their A team on this. All their top dogs are here, and that is they're coming off of other projects and such to address our project. We're in a very a very uneasy time in construction, I should say. That's probably a better way to describe it, but rapid escalation of costs, subcontractor availability. We haven't, there's not a lot of folks left standing from the last economic downturn, and it just makes it a little more difficult to get folks on board. We think this contractor is not boosting profits. Looking at the SubGuard program that you were familiar with, we've seen a lot of construction managers at risk employ that, as reported by folks kind of in my position. And really it is kind of a profit center for contractors if used just across the board. It gives them complete protection. There's a fee there that we end up paying. We think that Hickory is not going to do that in a way that is going to damage us. They're going to use it very carefully, bonding of contractors, pre-qualification of contractors. So that's a good thing, whereas other contractors can kind of have a lower fee, but you'll pay for it elsewhere. And then finally, the general conditions, kind of some of the overhead in a project. We've seen other contractors bury a lot of costs in there that, again, we have to bear. So with those kind of mitigating factors, we believe that this is kind of a middle ground project. So we compared a number of projects. You saw in the request for qualifications several additional pieces of information from me and requests for information from them. And it is was a way of trying to understand costs and what they'll put in the general conditions, that overhead and such. So in summary, we looked at Isaac Dixon Elementary School. The CM fee was about 3.6%. They had other incentives that could raise their fee to about 4.7%. We looked at Wilburn Elementary and Wake Schools. Their fee out there was 4.29%. And I couldn't discern their incentives, but it appears that through sharing of contingency that there's additional fee there. So what we've come up with at Hickory Construction contract is a CM fee of 4.07%. And what we've done to incentivize them to not spend contingency, our contingency really is to do a sharing on the contingency. So they have a potential to, if they manage the job real well, we don't hit a lot of problems, that they can share the contingency of about $250,000. So we have a $500,000 contingency, and there's a 50-50 share at the end of the project. If you don't use this contingency through the project, that we basically share it evenly. So we end up with a total potential CMR fee of 5.3%, which we believe is kind of bracketed in between low and highs that we've seen across the state, and appears to be a fair representation of the difficulties and challenges of this particular project.
Tim, I imagine the higher the total cost, the lower the fee would be.
To some degree, it doesn't, not as much as you might think. It's really the difficulty of the project, and if it's a single stage project, that's a lot easier than a multi-stage project. If a project involves a lot of renovations to existing, then there's more risk there. Those are the factors that appear to affect the fee as much as the size of the project.
Who determines the contingency?
It's a negotiated item. You know, we look at what we typically would do for a contingency and that you need to have on any project, and we negotiated it with them and put this incentive in there to incentivize them to do a great job and protect our contingency.
And the contract's pretty clear about what has to be used for contingency. They can't hoard the money. There are 7, 8, 10 things in there that if this happens, the contingency will be paid. No negotiations. When you run into some other grayer areas is when we'll be arguing over contingency. But we've hit the high points on contingency. The things that matter, I think, is in there.
Could you list those, please? Tell me the page number.
Sure. Well, it's not as easy as, they're not all contained in one spot, but the bulk of them are. Page 25, you'll find the bulk of the contingency items.
Do we have the final contract? I know you had mentioned there was some.
You have the final.
numbers. Okay.
To pay for cost overruns on if contractor defaults, to pay for cost acceleration for tests or inspections, to maintain their schedule, to address different unforeseen site conditions, that's a biggie, to pay for quality assurance testing, inspections, to pay for legal costs associated or initiated by the contractor. And then one of the biggies is to pay for errors and omissions by the architect. So that would hit most of the big items that you would find in a contingency issue. Something that Tim, which gets to the second point of that we're asking you to do today, is this pre-qualification issue has become unnecessarily complicated in North Carolina, and it goes into high gear October the 1st. So one of the things which addressed in this fee is this is going to be one of the first projects to have to use this new method. It'll probably be the first project in the state having to use this new pre-qualification method, and we are busily drafting it now. It requires a lot of hoops to jump through. Nobody has anything drafted in North Carolina because this is a brand new statute, which is why it's important to get the site work pre-qualification done now, because we can get the contract awarded by September the 30th. We don't have to do that with that at least particular portion of that contract. So that's why we've asked you to adopt the pre-qualification criteria, which you have to, as a board, adopt some criteria. So we are just asking that you adopt this criteria. We reviewed it. It is the criteria that Hickory Construction sent to us. We've added some things to it. We would simply ask the board to adopt that as the criteria only for the site portion of the work. For the remainder, we will come back to you with a new policy as quickly as we can get it drafted. But we're having to put our heads together with UNC School Government, with State Construction, to come up with something. And it is challenging to get it done.
So really the site work contractors won't fall underneath the October?
They will not. If they can get the contract awarded by September 30th, which all systems are go to have that done, the old method is fine. The new law doesn't go into effect until October 1, which will hit us on the bulk of this contract. But
So I guess what you're saying, the cost of this is going to entail those new criteria that take effect October 1st, and the amount of work that'll be involved with that.
Half of the project, the site work, will be on the old system, and then the main building part of the project, which we would expect to award around the first of the year, somewhere in there, will be on the new system. But in order for the contractor to bid to subcontractors, he's got, his first step is the pre-qualification. So we need to, get that new system in place.
But this new criteria, is it going to cost a little bit more money to implement it?
No, not really. No.
really not.
Just a matter of getting the guidelines out.
Following the regulations, the legislation to, adhere to the it's just more paperwork and procedure, if you will. Is that accurate, Chad?
Yeah.
And it's just new ground,
Yeah.
No
It may
one's done
require a little more work on their part, just because this is something that's new. It's going to require more work on all of our parts, because we're trying to figure it out and understand it. To be quite honest with you, it's very confusing, unnecessarily so. But in any event, it will require just more work and oversight.
Any other questions?
You're talking about more work and oversight related to the new law that takes place October 1st?
Yes.
Not the CM at risk process. Have you all done a contract before with CM at risk?
Yes, we have.
Mr. Fearley, you had mentioned the challenges at the beginning of your brief overview. Could you list those challenges as far as the site's concerned?
As far as the site is concerned, just the overall project.
With the overall project challenge.
Why it's not as simple a project is because we have two phases of construction: administration and mobilization and bidding and such. That's probably the biggest one. It's like two projects, if you will. We have an expedited schedule. We've got, because winter's coming, we need things have to fall into place. There's, you can't, contractor can't use this as infill work. Got to be right on it. We did require their A team to be on board, and we think we have it. The uncertain times of this escalation of costs and availability of subcontractors, the careful use of subguard and qualification of subcontractors and bonding to protect the Board of Education funds, and limited general conditions that we've defined what can be in general conditions so that their costs can't be varied within the general conditions of the contract.
Anyone else?
Are there any other problems other than we know there's rock on the site? Has anything else been identified as an obstacle or
No, we've got a
unusual?
good design, and it's, you know, it's doable. The usual weather issues that are unpredictable, but other than that, we're in good shape.
Good. Anyone else?
I have some more questions, unless there's something else to present them.
Okay, go ahead.
Is this fee for the CM at risk, how do you compare that with if we had gone the traditional route? I'm assuming that general contractor fee is included in the bid. So what percentage would that normally be included in the bid?
It's hard to say because the normal process, we get a number. We don't get to see what fees are, but, you know, the rule of thumb is generally a 7% profit is what a contractor wants to make. Any business wants to make that kind of profit. So by taking some of the risk away, I think, and have this cooperative effort here, I think it should be a lower fee and should be right where it is.
Well, and the fact that none of this has been bid out, other than maybe the site work, there's not really any kind of total figure. We don't have a maximum price yet.
Yeah, we don't
So
have a
that-
maximum. All we're doing is setting a target at this point.
And to explain that process a little bit, they'll be having to come back with the site work and with the other phase of the contract and presenting a guaranteed maximum price, which if this board does not like that price, fire them. And the project's over. They're paid for what they get, and then we'll have to go back to the drawing board and do something different. But that's how these contracts work, is they will bring a price to us, to you, and then you'll get to decide and take it or leave it. So the site work, GMP that will be at probably the tail end of September. And we've had some discussion about what needs to be done with that, but then there'll be another GMP that comes back for the rest of the project, which will probably be at some point in December. So you'll know the numbers. I mean, about this process, everything is very fluid. You'll see everything.
Any other questions, Ms. Baldwin?
Well, I noticed in the contract that you're planning to use a commissioning agent again, and I just wondered how that had worked out with the Koontz and Evelyn School. Apparently it must have been a good thing. This would be also included as a subcontractor?
That entity would be contracted directly by the Board of Education, so that
Okay.
there's
It would be part of the price, but it wouldn't be under the.
no connection to the general contractor. We do
Okay.
the same with test and balance. That's another contract.
And I don't know if this is too detailed yet, but as far as the HVAC system for the school, because we had to add on those systems for Koontz and Evelyn to control just the office air, and that was rather expensive after the fact. Is this now included
Yes,
in
it
the
is.
contract? Okay. I know it seems that this is moving along rather quickly, and up to this point, there has been no effort to gather input from the parents. of the children who would attend the school, or the citizens in general. Is this going to be part of the architect's plan? Are they reaching out to the community to get input into the design from?
The design is based on the Evelyn and Kuntz prototype for a number of reasons. Equity being a big one. And basically lessons learned from Evelyn and Kuntz, changes in curriculum, changes in building code, the unique nature of the site. Those are the modifications we're making to the school. Now, we are considering this school a little differently than the other two schools because of its site and the relationship to the Enka community as, you know, being almost a community center. And we're trying to imbibe that into the architecture, but functionally, the school needs to be, for equity reasons and for curriculum support, to be very similar to Evelyn and Kuntz.
And can you reiterate the square footage of Evelyn and Kuntz versus this school?
Evelyn and Kuntz are about 107,000 square feet, and where we are on this is somewhere between 110 and 113. 113,000 square feet.
Is it important, like with the STEM high school here, the renovation process and the way the space is arranged for interaction with students and students working in teams, is that going to be part of the design? Was that part of Kuntz and Evelyn? You'd have to refresh my memory whether there were spaces
There
like
are,
that.
yeah, there's kind of community group spaces in the corridors and such to allow some pull-out spaces and such, but as far as teams, I mean, that's really what happened in the classroom, and it's a big part of that is how you do the furniture, and that's later on in the process. Do we do furniture more like STEM where stuff is on wheels, and that'll be a curriculum input on there as to where we want to go with that. But we are going to make the classrooms moldable, if you will, or flexible within the classroom depending on what is being taught there.
Yeah, I noticed in the contract about the polished concrete floors, it sounded like the only carpet was going to be in the office area.
In Media Center.
In Media Center, because I think, did you learn from Kuntz or Evelyn, there's carpet now in the classrooms, I believe, there,
Mhm.
or not?
No.
Because I didn't know how the teachers, you know, standing on concrete all day, to me, it's painful. I didn't know if you had any reactions like that from
That's
teachers.
probably the biggest
Mhm.
downfall of the concrete. It's really the only one that we've seen. Acoustics is another issue, but by using ceiling tile and surfaces that are more acoustically absorptive, you can kind of mitigate the sound issue. But yeah, that's we've probably been responsible for some sales of some good shoes in Evelyn and Kuntz. But we found that the maintenance, the ability to clean the floors, just the healthfulness of the indoor air quality is so much improved that made the decision to go on with the polished concrete. In fact, maintenance is looking to do it in our capital project instead of BCT, which is cheap to install but very expensive to maintain. We're moving in that direction.
And you can do some mats for the teachers.
You
to
can.
stand on, so.
You can, if a teacher's in a location near her teaching station, you can put mats there.
So were the teachers interviewed as far as at Kuntz and Evelyn, what they would suggest that we change about the design or anything?
We met with administrators and a couple of teachers, at Evelyn and Coons, but we met with administrators that, know the school and asked them to gather information from their teachers and what their reactions to the schools, the good and the bad, what lessons learned and such. So we gathered a lot of information from those two schools.
And I don't recall if the contract included late penalties for the contractor.
It does.
Okay.
Liquidate again.
But there was no penalty for us if we do cancel the contract after we get the GMP.
That's correct. You can cancel the contract at any time. It's a 7-day notice.
Oh, okay. Throughout the whole process.
I mean, you pay obviously for work that's been done up through, but it is a termination for convenience by the owner.
All right, anything else?
Yeah, I've got some more. I got this from DPI, the school planning department. They published the cost of recent school projects, and I'm sure you've got a copy too. Of course, Asheville Middle School and Isaac Dixon, which you referenced, Isaac Dixon, the cost of those schools is way off the charts per square foot. With Asheville Middle School at $230 per square foot and Isaac Dixon at $227, and nothing else comes close to them. I'm concerned with this cost per square foot, and I guess we'll get that with the GMP when we get the guaranteed maximum price. And I don't know how this PM at-risk fee is going to affect that cost per square foot at this point. I did talk to Cabarrus County's construction director because they're getting ready to build an elementary school. In fact, they're bidding it out this week. They said they're looking at a cost between around $143 to $146 per square foot. Do you see us being in that range on this school?
I suspect we're going to be in the 165 in that range. Of course, upfront construction costs can be manipulated in a couple of ways depending how it's reported in there. So I would caution you not to take that report as gospel, because what's included in the categories and how it's reported can have a big effect on those square foot costs. But also remember that you're making decisions all the time in design about long-term operational costs versus upfront construction costs. So if you do something like Isaac Dixon where they're going for a zero, and you're going to pay more upfront, but then your operational costs will be lower. We're taking what I think is the most appropriate position. It's kind of a middle ground, but before your construction costs rise very, steeply versus the long-term savings, we're trying to find that sweet spot of upfront construction costs versus lowered operational costs. So.
Has anything changed at the last meeting on August 14th, I believe? I had just asked you about that square footage range, and you said about $150 to $160 per square foot, and now you said $165 per square foot. I guess those are just off-the-cuff estimates.
They are right now.
Until we have the
until-
bid from the contractor, we have no idea.
We got
what the-
nothing right now.
Just, so.
Exactly.
And we can adjust that. When we have a design, the contractor will be bidding it and showing us the bids, and if it's not where we want it to be, it doesn't meet our budget, then we'll ask the architect and contractor to rework it in whatever manner we agree to be within our budget. And that's the magic of this, that we can make this building exactly what we want it to be at and meet our budget and not have a surprise on bid day. That sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's a gamble.
Yeah, I noticed a preliminary drawing on one of the documents that we have, and I don't know if it was just, if it is something they're looking at, but it appeared that the, if I can describe this accurately, there were offset, it's not like a straight building, but there's like offset classrooms.
Mhm.
Does that incur a greater cost to do that rather than just having straight sides?
Yeah, the
like a
cheapest
box?
thing is to build a metal building with a big box and goes straight. But what that does for us is create both indoor and outdoor spaces without having to build rooms. So those kind of group spaces, those pull-out spaces, it gives more light into the classrooms by being able to push a room out and get additional natural daylight in. So yeah, the cheapest thing is to build just a big box.
Mr. Chair, can I ask Mr. Fairley a
Sure.
follow-up question? Mr. Fairley, isn't it, when we look at price per square foot, Ms. Baldwin wanted to ask about, it's, to me, it seems to be an irrelevant number unless you're building the same exact prototype building with the same rock in the ground or no rock in the ground, or weather issues or delays.
And the
In
same-
comparing one school to another school, and it would seem to me also that I would guess, and you might have an answer to this, but I would guess that you can't guarantee that the cost for brick, for example, is the same in western North Carolina that it is in Lumberton or Raleigh or anywhere else. So all those types of things factor into the price per square foot.
The
There are
availability of
variables,
contractors.
materials, all those types of things factor in.
You bet. It's regional, it's local, there's a lot of factors. It's site related. There's a lot of things that
And you feel like from this board, and I think this board's been pretty clear, that your charge as you and Dr. Baldwin interact with all phases of this project is to build the best building possible for the least amount of money. Would that be an accurate assessment?
yes, I mean, dude, we're gonna build a, 50, 75-year building. We're not building shopping centers that will be torn down in 5 years when a new prototype comes out, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, on section 33 of the contract, it talks about testing and inspections. And it says the owner, Board of Education, shall employ and pay for the services of independent testing firms to perform all inspections, tests, or approvals required by the contract documents. What would this entail?
That's the commissioning agent, maybe.
It could be commissioning, it could be test and balance. You install your HVAC system, and are you getting the proper flow, and how do you adjust the valves and the dampers in there? That's what your test and balance does. And so that you can fine tune your mechanical system. You don't just install it and say that's
Radon
good.
testing,
There's a lot of
things like that.
That's not involving like the permits and for construction.
There's special inspections that are required by code, and they are performed under the architect's contract, so they have to coordinate very closely between the contractor, the special inspector, and the architect to document that, make sure it happens. So that is under the architect's contract.
The reason why the architect's contract is a little higher than we've seen for others, because these are all new requirements, which probably aren't factored into anything you saw in the DPI.
Right.
We're getting hit with all new things all the time, and that was a significant cost in the
You bet.
architect contract that was not in place for Pennington Evelyn.
Yeah, I just was wondering about the design, thinking 50 years ahead, if we're still using this building, and say that the needs have changed, the population has changed. For example, is the design versatile enough to accommodate that school being used for another purpose, as far as possibly different grades, or like a middle school that would need more athletic fields, or, I'm just curious, I mean, I know this is very hypothetical, but, you know, if we're planning a building that's gonna last 75 years, you know, is that a possibility?
It's a possibility. I'm sure there would be renovations necessary if you change significant grade level. You know, fortunately, the intermediate is kind of a tweener, if you will. So whichever way you went, or I'm sure there would be some sort of renovations required.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't said, hey, this is going to be a high school in the future and we need to build it as such. Haven't done that.
I guess I am concerned about, probably all of us are, the two charter schools that have opened within probably 1 to 2 mile radius of that property, which we knew about. You know, these charters were coming, we just didn't know their location specifically. Now that we do, has anybody looked at the impact on the enrollment in the Enka district as far as the elementaries and the middle school there? You know, is it, I know we've approved the architect contract. You know, if overcrowding is not an issue in any of these schools anymore, is it possible to even cancel the architect contract? What kind of penalties would we incur?
First off, I understand that not all of the students that are attending those charter schools are necessarily from the Enka district.
Exactly.
And from what I understand, they're coming from not necessarily public schools. Like maybe a third of those students are coming from other entities. I mean, I don't think it's,
I would think that's probably not an appropriate question for
Right.
Mr. Pearley to answer.
To address your question, yes, there is a possibility to get out of the architect's contract, but we pay for the work that's been performed up to date.
Mm-hmm.
That specifically answers your question. I'm not sure if anyone can accurately answer your first question at this point.
Dr. Baldwin, are we looking at those statistics right now?
I've looked at them. I guess a question I would pose is probably the reverse. Are we losing students at Enka Middle School because of the crowded situation, and will this new school then attract those particular students back? That's a toss-up. You're talking about total projection.
Right, I know, I mean, the enrollment's not down very much, I don't think, just from what hearsay I've heard is that Enka's gone over the past 2 years from 1,057 students down to the 990s right now, and I mean, it's hard to tell the first of the year what's occurring.
We're monitoring that across the entire state.
Right, but I
And we'll have
elementary.
student figures, what, in a month?
20 days.
Yeah.
And we're not here to debate whether we're gonna do the school or not, are we?
Yeah, I think
We've decided that on.
So,
I think it's important though to keep track of what's trending out there, and
I think Dr. Baldwin and his staff do a very good job of that. All right, do I have a motion to approve the construction manager at risk contract with the attachments?
I'd be happy to make that motion for you, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to say that, you know, at the last meeting, it became apparent that the CM at risk process had been decided behind closed doors by a few people, not the board. The board did not make the decision. I don't think this, it's a complex site.
The
This
we
is
not vote?
information
Did we not vote?
was presented to the board and the board voted, so
We could have voted against it just
Yes,
as easily
that's
as we could
exactly
have
right.
voted as we voted for it.
That's
So that's an
exactly right.
inaccurate assessment.
That was decided before we were even brought contracts. My point is, usually a CM at risk process is warranted when you have a complex site. Mr. Fearley has just laid out the lack of challenges with the site. It doesn't warrant this process, which has yielded to be very expensive for some other schools, rather than the traditional bidding process. So I will be voting against this contract because I feel like we should have bid this out in a traditional manner to get the best price for our money.
Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, moving on, we have a set of pre-qualification criteria. This would apply only to the site work contracts, correct?
Correct.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Bliss, for the second.
Is Mr. Donahue, the pre-qualifications, is this criteria pretty standard for the?
It is. I
contracts?
mean, yeah, we just tweaked it by one little thing. It's very thorough.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Before we all get out, I've just got a